Assalamualaikum everyone. So today our group from AS2392A will be presenting an assessment under subject IHS 421, which is Chemical Health Risk Assessment. So before we starting our video, let me introduce you to my group assessment, which is consists of 9 people, which is me, Muhammad Razif bin Nurman, Muhammad Nakib bin Razali, Nur Alia Shakira binti Muhammad Nasir, Sofia Azrina binti Muhammad Syam, Nur Zarifah Darini binti Muhammad Safwan, Nurul Syairah Najiha binti Muhammad Subandario, Nur Anis Najiha binti Muhammad Nur Syaril, Nur Syamimi binti Kasmin, and lastly Siti Nurul Syafiqah binti Muhammad Saiful Azizi. So these are the parts that we'll discuss in this video, which is the first one, introduction, second one, process and work unit description, third one, assessment methodology, fourth one, assessment finding, fifth one, discussion, and lastly, recommendation on action to be taken. So in this part, which is introduction part, this assessment has been held in Block A A504, specifically in Biomolecular Culture Laboratory, Faculty of Applied Science in UiTM Shah Alam, Selangor. And the person in charge in Encik Khairul Azman bin Osman, which is a veterinary assistant officer. And this assessment has been held on 13 April 2026. And the working time is Monday until Friday from 8:30 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. with 1 hour lunch break from 1:30 p.m. until 2:30 p.m. And some roles of PIC including setting up tests, cleaning and sanitizing the equipment, and recording data for analysis and report writing.
So I will explain about the objective and scope of the assessment. Firstly, to determine the risk that each chemical substance being used, handled, stored, or transported in the workplace poses. Next, to determine the extent of a worker's exposure to a chemical substance through ingestion, thermal absorption, or inhalation. And to assess the effectiveness of the current control measure. After that, to recommend additional appropriate control measure and prioritize activities to be implemented to prevent or decrease risk. After that, to determine the level of exposure for the specific chemicals such as shift reagent solution, potassium dichromate solution, and potassium ferricyanide solution for the work unit of lab workers. And lastly, to evaluate the efficiency of the current control measure and suggest action that the management of UiTM should take to improve worker safety.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Nakib and I will continue present with the process and work unit description for the biomolecular culture laboratory at UiTM. Okay, this laboratory is used for teaching, practical class, and research. The main activity at this lab is preparing culture media, conducting biomolecular experiment, handling samples, sterilizing equipment, and managing laboratory waste. All laboratory user must wear PPE and follow laboratory SOP to ensure safety. So we don't want any hazard. Okay, next we continue with process flow at for work area. Okay, first one is culture media and solution are prepared. Next, cell culture is carried out and maintained. Then biomolecular experiment and analysis are performed. After the experiment, all waste is disposed of properly and the work area is disinfected. And the last one is the laboratory and equipment are clean and sterilized for the next user. Next, we go to 2.3, which is work unit description. For this assessment, the work unit consists of one male laboratory technician. He worked from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. From Monday to Friday, with a 1 hour lunch break from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. His responsibility include preparing culture, media, and chemical solution, conducting biomolecular experiment, handling chemical safety, operating laboratory equipment, and managing laboratory waste. At the end of the work, he cleaned and sterilized the laboratory to maintain a safe working environment for all users.
Hi, my name is UiTM Shah Alam and I will present about assessment methodology. The step into the chemical health risk assessment according with the CHRA member 2017 and above 10 CHRA step, which is gather information, divide into work unit, determine degree of hazard of CHTH in each work unit, evaluate exposure from all possible routes of exposure, determine level of risk, evaluate the adequacy of control measure, conclude assessment, identify action to be taken, recommendation and design action priority AP, and lastly prepare, present and submit report. For gather information, assessors provide information facilitated through the workplace to identify all relevant information about chemicals that involve that can be hazardous to health that used in the workplace. The, the information that has been gathered also include the outline of workplace, process flow chart, workers at risk, engineering control equipment, accident and incident, personnel exposure monitoring program, health or medical, and many more. This information was obtained using qualitative assessment through an inspection tour of the workplace (UV), plus report, work procedure, and conduct interview with lab assistant. Number two is divide into work unit. Assessors perform an inspection of the workplace where all the chemicals are used, handled, and released into the environment, and divide into work unit that exist. Work unit is a group of workers who believed to expose to similar health risks as arising from the use of particular CHTH. Number three is determine degree of hazard of CHTH in each workplace. All the hazardous chemicals that were used to handle and release into the workplace are obtained from SDS, safety data sheet that are provided by lab assistant. The degree of hazard is determined based on hazard classification, acute toxicity or health effect of the CHTH by considering also the rate of exposure. Next, evaluate exposure from all possible routes of exposure. The exposure of chemical to each work unit was assessed by interview and observation using the method. Determine level of risk. The level of risk is determined based on the risk rating, which is derived from the hazard rating and exposure rating. The level of risk for thermal exposure is determined based on information on the hazardous property, observation on extent of thermal contact, duration, exposure. Evaluate the adequacy of control measure is simultaneously with the exposure evaluation by inspection, checking record on control equipment, and procedure into the use and maintenance of within. Equipment maintenance is done through preventive maintenance. There are no reports of accident and incident. No chemical exposure monitoring has been done. Conclude assessment. Assessment incomplete based on the result of the level of risk and the adequacy of existing control measures. The conclusion will be used as a basis to prioritize the action to be taken by employer for controlling the exposure to CHTH. Identify action to be taken. After concluding the assessment, action required for further precautions and improved control measures are made based on conclusion which is addressed in Form D of the assessment. Recommendation and design action priority AP. The assessor should assign the action priority on each identified action to be taken. The employee should use the action priority assigned in preparation of the action plan for implementation of the identified control measure. Lastly is prepare, present and submit report. Assessor has to prepare a well-written report for the purpose of follow-up action.
Hi, my name is Nur Zarifah Daini binti Ahmad Safan and I'll be presenting the assessment findings. There are four components of the findings, which are summary of assessment result, summary of level of risk through inhalation by work unit, summary of level of risk through thermal absorption by work unit, and summary of action priority. So first is the summary of assessment result. So this assessment result consists of hazard classification, hash code, hazard rating, level of risk, adequacy of existing control, and action priority. So there are 10 hazardous chemicals that are related to this work unit, which is the first one is potassium dichromate. So this chemical cause adverse health effect through inhalation, dermal, and oral. So the overall hazard rating is 5. The level of risk is moderate for inhalation. For dermal is high. So the adequacy of existing control is inadequate. Therefore, the action priority is 2. Next is the potassium ferricyanide. It causes serious eye irritation. The hazard rating is 1. The level of risk is moderate for dermal. The adequacy of existing control is inadequate. So the action priority is 2. Potassium nitrate equals acute facility for inhalation. The hazard rating is 3. The level of risk is moderate for inhalation. The existing control also inadequate, so the action priority is 2. Potassium thiocyanate, it causes adverse health effect through inhalation, dermal, and oral. The hazard rating is 2. The level of risk is moderate for inhalation and also moderate for dermal. The existing control also inadequate, so the action priority also 2. Propionic acid cause adverse health effect through inhalation and dermal. The hazard rating is 5. The level of risk is moderate for inhalation and high for dermal. The existing control also inadequate. The action priority also 2. Proteinic K, it causes adverse health effect through inhalation and dermal. The hazard rating is 4. The level of risk is moderate for inhalation and moderate also for dermal. The existing control also inadequate, so the action priority is AP2. Next, sodium azide. Sodium azide causes adverse health effect through dermal, inhalation, and also oral. The hazard rating is 3. The level of risk is moderate for inhalation and high for dermal. The existing control is inadequate, so the action priority also 2. Sodium carbonate causes only dermal effect. The hazard rating is 1. The level of risk is moderate. The adequacy of control is inadequate, and the action priority is 2. Ethanol also only causes health effect through dermal. The hazard rating is 1. The level of risk is moderate. The existing control is inadequate, and the action priority also 2. Shift reagent, the adverse health effect is through dermal and also inhalation. The hazard rating is 3. The level of risk is moderate and for inhalation and high for dermal. The existing control is inadequate, and also the action priority is 2.
My name is Najiha, and today I will talk about the summary of level of exposure risk through inhalation in dermal and the summary of the action priority. Let's start by looking at table 4.2, which detail our inhalation risk assessment. So we evaluate a total 7 chemicals, and the data show that 6 out of 7 chemicals present a moderate risk. This means that they don't expose immediate emergency, but they still required a steady monitoring and solid control measure to keep workers safe. On the bright side, only 1 chemical was identified as low risk. However, look at table 4.3. We analyzed that dermal absorption for 9 chemicals, and we found that 4 out of 9 chemicals are into the higher hazard category, and the remaining 5 chemicals are in the lower hazard category. So because nearly half of these substances pose a severe risk to the skin, we identified that dermal absorption as the main route of exposure for this assessment. So looking at our actual summary data, we found out that we have 0 chemical under AP1, which means we have no critical emergencies that require us to shut down any operation immediately. Instead, our finding shows that we have 10 items marked as AP2, and this is where our primary focus must go. To conclude, we identify a moderate inhalation risk and a high dermal absorption risk. Our evaluation determined that the current control measures in lab are inadequate to fully protect the lab staff.
So my name is Nur Shakira binti Muhammad Nasir, and now I will explain 5.0 discussion. Based on the Chemical Health Risk Assessment CHRA, several chemicals hazardous to health CHTH were identified in the A504 biomolecular laboratory. These chemicals may pose health risks to laboratory personnel, especially veterinary assistant officers, if they are exposed repeatedly or over a long period. Therefore, appropriate control measures are important to minimize chemical exposure and ensure a safe working environment. Now, I will explain 5.1 factors causing significant risks. The veterinary assistant officer frequently handles hazardous chemicals during laboratory activities such as preparing culture media, cleaning laboratory equipment, and conducting biomolecular experiments. The main hazardous chemical identified were potassium dichromate and potassium nitrate, which may cause skin, eye, and respiratory irritation. Chemical exposure can occur through three main routes. First, skin contact. Second, inhalation of dust or vapors. And third, eye contact during weighing, transferring, or preparing chemical solutions. The risk increases due to frequent handling of hazardous chemicals, the use of powder and concentrated chemicals, and improper handling or inconsistent use of PPE. Therefore, following safe work procedures is essential to reduce chemical exposure. Now, I will explain 5.2 existing technical control measures. Several technical control measures are already implemented in the laboratory. First, chemicals are stored in designated cabinets, properly labeled, and kept tightly closed to prevent spills and contamination. Second, the laboratory is equipped with a biosafety cabinet and a well-maintained ventilation system to reduce exposure to airborne contaminants. Lastly, appropriate PPE, including lab coats, gloves, safety goggles, and face masks, is provided and used during laboratory activities. Overall, these technical controls were found to be adequate and help minimize chemical exposure in the laboratory.
My name is Nur Najiha. Now I will present 5.3 adequacy of organizational control. First is safe work system and practices. Several safety measures have already been implemented. SOP are available for laboratory tasks and chemical handling. Appropriate PPE is provided. Scheduled waste management is carried out. Chemicals are segregated according to their hazard class, and both the SDS and chemicals register are available. However, there are still some areas for improvement. The safe work system is not properly documented. There are no documented records for PPE issuance, inspection, maintenance, or training. And although first aid kits are available, there is no inspection checklist and some equipment is insufficient. Second is information, instruction, and training. Chemical labels comply with the class regulation 2013 and safety signage are clearly displayed in the laboratory. This reflects good management commitment to chemical safety. However, refresher training is recommended to ensure workers maintain valid knowledge and certification. Lastly, personal hygiene. Eating, drinking, and smoking are prohibited in the laboratory. Chemical waste bins and hand washing facilities are also provided. However, emergency shower and eye wash station are not available. Therefore, installing these emergency facilities is recommended to improve worker safety. Overall, while organizational control are generally in place, improvements in documentation, PPE management, and emergency hygiene facilities are still needed. Next, I will present 5.4, Adequacy of Emergency Response Preparedness. Based on our assessment, several emergency facilities are already available in the laboratory. An emergency response plan or ERP is available, and emergency contact information is clearly displayed. The laboratory is also equipped with fire extinguisher, including ABC dry powder and carbon dioxide types. These fire extinguishers are well maintained and within their inspection and expiry dates. In addition, first aid kits are easily accessible, and a chemical spill kit together with a fire blanket are also provided to manage emergency situation. However, there are still areas that needed improvement. Emergency eye wash station and safety shower are not available. These facilities are very important because they allow immediately treatment if someone accidentally exposed to hazardous chemicals. Overall, although several emergency facilities are already in place, the emergency response preparedness is still assessed as inadequate due to absence of emergency eye wash and safety shower facilities. Therefore, these facilities should be installed to improve emergency readiness and ensure better protection for laboratory personnel. Thank you.
Now, for the last part, 5.5, Adequacy of Exposure Monitoring and Medical Surveillance. Based on the assessment, no baseline chemical exposure monitoring (CEM) has been conducted for this work unit. In addition, there is no established medical surveillance program for personnel who are regularly exposed to hazardous chemicals. Without exposure monitoring and medical surveillance, it is difficult to detect potential health effects at an early stage. Therefore, it is recommended that the laboratory implement a CEM program and predict medical surveillance to better protect laboratory personnel.
Moving on to our first recommendation, engineering controls. This involves structural change to our plan, process, or equipment design to minimize, suppress, or contain hazardous chemical right at the source. Common examples include general ventilation, water sprays, and local exhaust ventilation. In our laboratory, we specifically utilize local exhaust ventilation to capture harmful contaminants directly where they are generated. This safely exhausts the fumes outside and completely away from the workers' breathing zone. It is vital to remember that engineering controls must always be considered our first and foremost line of defense. For example, when our fume hoods are functioning optimally, personal respirators are not necessary to prevent vapor inhalation. This ensures an inherently safe worker environment for everyone before relying on manual protective measures. Next, let's discuss personal protective equipment or PPE. While engineering controls act as our primary barrier, the provision and use of PPEs is considered our final line of defense within the hierarchy of risk control. To be effective, PPE must be strictly selected based on the specific chemical handled, the required level of protection, and the exact body parts exposed to risk. For our daily operation, mandatory protective gear includes safety goggles, face shield, and nitrile glove. These are essential to completely prevent any direct skin contact with corrosive substance. Additionally, a thin 3-layer fabric disposable face must be worn at all times to provide necessary and reliable respiratory protection within the work unit. Finally, we have administrative controls. This refers to the managerial work practice and policies explicitly designed to reduce the frequency and severity of chemical exposure. First, we must conduct comprehensive safety and chemical handling training for all staff at least twice a year. Second, highly visible warning signage printed in dark red against a white background must be posted at conspicuous location around the laboratory. Third, our chemical register must be updated every 5 years, ensuring it is clearly displayed for all workers in both English and Malay. Lastly, management must ensure strict and conditional compliance with both the Scheduled Waste 2005 and Industrial Influence 2009 regulation. This safeguards our operational compliance and fulfills our environmental responsibilities. Thank you.